Welcome back to the Midnight Fire. Tonight we journey deep into a forest that doesn't forget, in a story we call The Roots That Remember. Liam had always felt more at home among trees than people. As a botanist, the forest was his laboratory, his sanctuary. So when he heard whispers of the Whispering Woods, a primeval forest untouched by modern logging, he knew he had to go. Locals spoke of it in hushed tones, warning that the trees there were different. They said the woods remembered everything that happened beneath their canopy. Liam, a man of science, dismissed it as folklore, a charming but ultimately baseless superstition. He packed his gear, kissed his wife Sarah goodbye, and promised to be back in a week with samples that would make his career. The edge of the Whispering Woods felt like a threshold. One moment he was in a normal, sun-dappled forest. The next he stepped into a perpetual twilight. The air grew still and heavy, and the silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of his own boots on the damp earth. The trees were colossal, ancient beings with bark like wrinkled skin and branches that intertwined to form a dense, light-blocking ceiling. Liam felt a shiver, not of cold, but of a primal awe mixed with a strange unease. He set up his camp near a small, clear stream, feeling like an intruder in a vast, silent cathedral. His first day was a botanist's dream. He discovered species of moss he'd only read about in textbooks and fungi that glowed with a faint, ethereal light. He meticulously documented everything, his scientific curiosity overriding his initial apprehension. That night, however, was different. As he sat by his small campfire, the woods seemed to close in. The firelight cast long, dancing shadows that looked like grasping fingers. He kept hearing faint whispers like the rustle of leaves, but they sounded oddly like human voices, too indistinct to make out any words. He told himself it was just the wind, the paranoia of being alone in a strange place. The next day he ventured deeper. He found a massive, gnarled oak at the heart of a clearing. Its roots spread out like thick, muscular pythons, burrowing deep into the soil. There was an old, weathered carving on its trunk, a single crudely etched eye. As he reached out to touch it, a sharp pain shot up his arm. He pulled back to find a long, deep scratch, already beating with blood. He hadn't felt any thorns. It was as if the bark itself had cut him. Shaken, he bandaged his hand and tried to rationalize it. A sharp piece of wood, a hidden thorn he'd missed. But the feeling of being watched intensified. The whispers grew louder that night, and this time he could almost make out a word, a name. His name, Liam. Panic began to creep in. He decided to pack up and leave the next morning. But when he woke, his camp was in disarray. His neatly packed samples were scattered, his research notes torn to shreds, and his GPS was smashed, the screen a spiderweb of cracks. There was no sign of an animal, no paw prints, just his own footprints in the soft earth. Despair washed over him. He was lost. He tried to retrace his steps, but the forest seemed to have rearranged itself. Paths he was sure he had taken were gone, replaced by impenetrable thickets of thorny vines. The trees loomed over him, their branches twisting into grotesque shapes. Every direction he turned led him back to the clearing with the ancient oak. It was like the forest was playing a cruel game with him, herding him back to its heart. The whispers were constant now, a chorus of voices swirling around him, mocking his fear. They spoke of things he had long forgotten, childhood mistakes, a cruel prank he'd played, a promise he'd broken to a friend. The woods didn't just remember, they knew ***. Days blurred into a nightmare of hunger and exhaustion. He survived on what little food he had left and the water from the stream. His scientific mind, once his greatest asset, was now his tormentor. He couldn't explain what was happening. He started seeing things in the periphery, fleeting shapes that vanished when he turned his head. One evening, huddled by his failing fire, he saw a figure emerge from the trees. It was tall and gaunt, made of woven branches and roots, with glowing fungi for eyes. It didn't move towards him. It just stood at the edge of the firelight, watching. Liam screamed, scrambling backward, and the figure dissolved back into the shadows. He was losing his mind. Was any of this real? He stumbled back to the great oak, the epicenter of his torment. He fell to his knees before it, exhausted and broken. "What do you want from me?" He sobbed into the dirt. The whispers answered a single, clear voice rising above the others, a voice that sounded like creaking wood and rustling leaves. "We remember," it said. "We remember the axe, the fire, the ones who came before." Liam's blood ran cold. He remembered a story his grandfather, a logger, used to tell. A story about his first job, clearing a patch of cursed old-growth forest. They had clear-cut a section of it, ignoring the local legends, burning what they couldn't haul away. His grandfather had always been haunted by it, saying he felt the forest anger in his bones for the rest of his life. Liam now understood. He was the descendant of one of those men. The woods remembered the sins of his ancestors, and they were demanding retribution. The scratch on his hand throbbed, and he looked down to see thin, green tendrils, like tiny roots, growing from the wound, weaving into his skin. The forest wasn't just remembering. It was claiming him as part of itself, a debt paid in flesh and blood. He tried to pull the tendrils out, but they were embedded deep, and the pain was excruciating. The whispers swirled around him, no longer menacing, but almost welcoming, a lullaby of rustling leaves. "Stay," they seemed to say. "Become one of us, remember with us." His vision blurred. The world of green and brown swam before his eyes. He saw Sarah's face, heard her voice calling his name, but it was distant, a memory from another life. His last conscious thought was of the great oak, its single carved eye seeming to weep a single drop of amber sap. He felt his body being pulled down into the soft, rich earth. His own roots began to take hold. Back in the civilized world, Sarah waited. A week turned into 2, then a month. Search parties were sent into the Whispering Woods, but they found nothing. Not a single trace of Liam or his campsite. The forest kept its secrets well. They eventually gave up, declaring him lost to the wilderness. Sarah mourned, never knowing the truth. But if you were to walk deep into the Whispering Woods today, to that clearing with the ancient oak, you might notice something new. Among the gnarled roots at its base, there's a young sapling, strangely human-like in its form. Its bark is smooth, and its leaves tremble, even when there is no wind. And sometimes on a quiet night, if you listen very, very closely, you might hear it whisper a name. Sarah. A lonely botanical memory, forever rooted in the forest that never forgets. Thank you for listening to The Midnight Fire. If the woods call to you, perhaps think twice before answering. Join us again next time, if you dare, for another tale from the shadows. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Sleep well.